Solutions to the Dropout Crisis, addressing the dropout crisis one strategy at a time. Brought to you by the National Dropout Prevention Center Network with support from K-12 and Fuel Education and in partnership with Clemson Broadcast Productions. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome once again to Solutions. The summer has gone by so fast. Here we are in August, and it's time to start thinking once again about professional development. So here at Solutions, we're starting out with a wonderful topic, which we're going to talk about in a minute, called resiliency. But first, let me introduce you, as always, to my co-host, Karen Withington, the Assistant Director of the National Dropout Prevention Center. Karen, I'm glad to see you again. It's been a busy summer.
It has been, Marty, and I'm delighted to be here with you today.
Yeah, and everybody's raring to go because school's getting started very soon.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of hope that this particular program today will provide food for thought for different ways to look at what's going on. It's one of my favorite topics that relates to resiliency and looking at what works with students and how do we get all students to have those things that help them be strong and be able to go through the challenges of life.
Right.
So,
and resiliency, Marty, can really round out a look at, or it can be a piece of the data that schools can use to help them make decisions about where they might want to put supports in for students or teachers or, for their schools. So.
I mean, to me, this is exciting to know if there's data to be able to identify this. Well, because we've said this is professional development, we want to point out that on our website, we have these wonderful resources for our viewers to look at afterwards as they do professional development within their school and their district. And that is to go to that after the program today and start delving into this topic.
Right.
So that's huge.
They'll be listed they are listed right at the bottom of the webpage for this broadcast.
Yes, so www.dropoutprevention.org and go to the broadcast. And then the second thing I want to mention is if you have some experience or questions that you might want to ask, these are the Natural Dropout Prevention Center or our presenter today, there's a discussion board there right on this website at the Dropout Prevention website for this program. And then there's another thing that people can do.
Well, we have numerous ways to contact the National Dropout Prevention Center. Of course, you can email us, but we also have a Twitter account with at NDPCN. We have a Facebook page. We can have conversations through those vehicles as well as the discussion board on this webcast webpage.
And this is a great way to have discussions and conversations and the sharing of information. That's what the network is all about. Yeah. So we are happy to provide those resources. And now, without further ado, because we have a really fine program, we want to get started. So Karen, you have the honor of introducing our guest.
Oh, I'm so excited about this and have a great guest today, Leanne Stewart. She's Vice President of Curriculum and Instruction with Advanced Path Academics. She has presented at our conferences numerous times, and it's always great presentations there. So if you come to a conference, please look for Leanne Stewart's session. And Leanne also, Marty, is one of our first National Dropout Prevention Specialist Program completers. And so she has gone through the steps to be certified as a National Dropout Prevention Specialist through the program that we offer at the National Dropout Prevention Center. We are just beginning to put those completers up on our website. So once Leanne's bio and field project and the information about her is on our website, people can come and see some more information about Leanne.
Oh, that's terrific. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And welcome to our program.
I am delighted to be here. And just a call out to everyone who's considered going through the program to do the national certification. It is a great benefit. You meet a lot of wonderful people at the conferences, but this also gives you some increased conversation with folks and some connections about what did you think about this particular solution or strategy. So it's really a great benefit to those of us to extend what we're doing in the field.
That's
Well,
exciting.
it's good for you too to offer yourself as a resource to those people
Yes.
in your area and who are
Right.
interested in the same
That's right.
topics.
Delighted
Yeah.
to do that.
We're glad you did it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess viewers who are all of a sudden going, I want to do that, it's go to the website.
On
Yes.
our homepage,
Yeah.
we actually have a link right from our
Yeah.
homepage to the National
Of
Dropout
course.
Prevention Specialist
Right.
Certification Program. And you can
Everything's always
get the
on the
details.
website,
Well,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's our homepage.
Okay.
But today we're going to be talking about a way to enhance early warning systems, or think about enhancing that kind of data that you might get with traditional early warning systems, to enhance them to get kind of a truer picture
Right.
of what's going on. So we want to hear all about that.
Awesome. Well, we're going to do that absolutely, and to look at how we can get that picture of that whole child, and how we as a district or a school can begin to address those needs to help. I'm going to start though with telling you a little bit of a story about a child. This is a student who suburban high school, suburban elementary, middle school, went all the way through that, had really wonderful parents, and played in the orchestra, was in choir, very involved. All of the teachers would look at this child and think, wow, smart, always there, always present, all of that business.
Yeah.
And when the school looked at the ABC data, what we call ABC data, their attendance, their behavior, and their grades, that student was always present. They were always well behaved. There were great grades, not straight A's or anything like that, but you would not have known there was an issue with this particular student. By the time that student got to high school, that student felt disconnected, but there was no change in ABC data. They felt they weren't a part of any kind of crowd. They kind of broke down their senior year in high school and spent a month basically crying and didn't know how to make it stop for them. I was that student. And so resiliency and getting a real true picture of what the students look like and what the root cause of their struggle is very, very dear to me. And I'm not alone. I wasn't alone then. It's just now we need to call more attention to it. We've got kids, as you know, any of the data across the nation really shows us, that are struggling inside of themselves, not just with whether I go to school today or what my grades are, or not picking a fight. The Kids Count data source shows that there were over 700,000 kids who weren't in school in 2014. It's a huge number. And that's just 16 through 19-year-olds.
Yeah.
And then the Jason Project really helps us to look at the number of kids who attempt and have suicidal issues. And I was flabbergasted when I saw the number that 5,400 kids every day.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I was blown away.
And often with no signs, nobody at school knew anything was going on.
Right. That's exactly right. Now, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention has a student surveillance survey and some things that educators can do and that some students can take. And they had a very interesting project that involved several states in looking at and capturing that information and looking at it over time. So things like, I've been approached at school to buy or to sell drugs, or I've seriously attempted suicide. And when they looked at some of those pieces, and there's a link on the resources if you want to look at that further, but they looked at that, if you look over time, there really wasn't any growth in the positive outcomes for many of those states. And you can compare it to the national data, and there wasn't any difference. In fact, one of their measures was on physical education. And the answer was, I have not done at least 60 minutes of physical education a week. And the national figure shot up. It was amazing to me that over time we've had a huge decrease. Less activity. That's absolutely right. And that is just one factor that can contribute to resiliency. But all of these factors really have to come together so that we have an awareness. When we're looking at early warning systems, we need to recognize that just looking at the ABC data isn't going to get us there.
At all. Yeah.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
So when we define, first off, if we're a district or we're a building or an organization, we want to look and say, okay, what's our definition for an early warning system? And so we look at a couple, and one of them says it's that it really is something that alerts the community or the educators when a student falls behind. Sometimes we look at things in autopsy mode. When they fall behind or they fall off the track, sometimes that's too late. So we've got to look and see if we can't get to finding things a little bit earlier.
Yeah, well, we're talking about prevention. We're
Right.
talking about prevention.
That's exactly right. So we want to prevent those issues that are going to cause that dropout later. One of the other key pieces in looking at some of the research was looking at locations that have good tools, and some tools out there for those definitions. The American Institute for Research is one of those. And I like their definition because it talks about ensuring that you have validated indicators. So making sure that what you are looking at in resiliency can be measured and measured over time. But they also still want to look at those missing key educational milestones. Again, we're looking at, if I'm missing those, what are my risk factors before I get there? So we really, really want to look at that before a kid leaves school. Let's focus on prevention.
When you're talking about resiliency, I'm thinking it's important because some warning signals may be more significant for some students than others, depending on that amount of resiliency. Is that why we need to include resiliency, or one of the reasons?
We do want to include resiliency as a part of an early warning system, absolutely, because if we're just looking at our ABC data, then again, that's looking at it at one single point in time, and it's historical. So it doesn't get, if I look at my grades or any child's grades, that doesn't get to what's going on inside of me at any point in time.
Right.
So we really want to look at making sure we have our definition of our early warning system first. So we'll talk about our adding resiliency, but even before a district starts to say what those are, we need to make sure that we all have the same language and the communication. So our early warning system has to be valid for its intended purpose. You can't just go and get ABC data and then just stick something onto it just because you think you're going to do a Survey Monkey tool. It needs to have some validation. It needs to have some action that we as educators can take. Okay. So a feel-good survey may or may not get us anything. It needs to be easy to understand and meaningful, and it needs to be aligned to the district's and the school's priorities. So is it that we're going to do and implement an early warning service as a part of an RTI or a multiple tiers system, or is it that we are going to focus on changing culture? So it needs to be informed by what the direction of the district is. The addition then, and this gets to Karen's question a little bit earlier, is really, once we know and have that definition, then we can begin to look at and say, okay, what is our definition of resiliency and social-emotional learning that we are going to measure as we move forward as a part of our early warning system? And so we have found 6 areas that are very applicable to this. And so we map those. So we have attendance, behavior, and coursework, and then we add to that whether I value education, my confidence across different areas, am I connected?
Yes.
So for me, as I told that story, that's one of the things I didn't feel, as involved as I was. I was not going to drop out. My parents would not have let that happen, but I did not feel connections to my peers. I would have shown up on a high quality resiliency survey as being at risk in my connections to my peers. It should show stress. And different types of stress. Ideally, it will dive down so that you know what those stress areas are, so that you can address those. And that may not be something that you address in the classroom. It may be that you're talking about the community that supports that student to be able to address those measures.
Like example.
So if I have financial stress, if I'm a high school in an area where a lot of the students are having to work in order to keep a roof over their heads, then they're going to have a sense of that financial stress. Well, you can actually see that in a high quality instrument. It's going to show you, it's going to drill down. It's not going to just tell you, oh, I'm stressed out of my mind. It's going to say, okay, they're stressed because of financial issues. They're stressed because of this, etc. That gives you data that you can then use. We could work with social service agencies. We could set up alternative academic programs so that you have kids who maybe come 4 hours in the morning and then they are able to go to work. So that you have some kind of alternative issues, alternative pieces that you're doing for those students.
That's a great example, because this is the part that I've been really curious about, is if you do this identification and you do find, I mean, in your story, what could have been done either in school or out of school to help this child. And we're talking about prevention. I mean, you obviously lived through it and did fine, but some children, you talk about the suicide rate. They or all of a sudden, without explanation, they aren't showing up to class. They aren't, they're home. I'm sick, or whatever. We want to head that off, and then for a school district to be responsive to the financial thing, be understanding they have to work and providing that. That's a real thing you could do. I kind of identified in a little way with high school. By toward the end, the thing that saved me was not in the school, and I did all those things: the choir, the marching, the this, the that. And the grades were fine, but there was always a sense of not belonging in that big school. Big school, about 2,300 students for a 3-year high school. But it was an external organization that was it was the high Y clubs that gave you the sense of belonging. It was nothing in that school. But that's the idea about reaching out and encouraging. There are things that schools can do, and counselors or mentors or teachers who can know their community and know that perhaps, the school thing is tough, but there's a holistic life. And I just like the way you're presenting the fact that, we can find these things out and show they are or they aren't resilient, but what can we do? And that mention about the school schedule, okay, now I'm beginning to understand what it is you're saying. So this is really excellent, because it is a community problem. I always say that dropout prevention is a community challenge. And connecting to the community is important, and knowing the resources for kids that are out there or within our own system, as you talked about changing systems, is the scheduling thing.
Right.
That's huge.
It's
That's
huge.
Yeah. Terrific.
And the first measure you said value of education.
Value
That's
in
also
education.
can be a community type thing. Is that what you're talking about? A measurement to how valuable or how education is valued. Is that what you mean by value education?
And that's why it's important to choose the right instrument, because you're going to have some instruments out there that will call valuing education just thinking it's important. But you're also going to have some who are going to separate that so that the student will report, do I value what's happening right now
Mm-hmm.
in my
Curriculum.
classes, my
Yeah.
education? Do I value my high school education as one component of valuing education, but then also do I value the potential of college and career related education? So a good instrument is going to separate those two. The importance of that is that, and we'll see this in just a little bit when we get into the data. Let's say you look at the data and you've got those two fields. You want a tool that's going to be able to sort that and look at it by building if I'm a district administrator. Because now if I look at 5 of my schools and I've got one school and all of that valuing education for that one location is way below everybody else, what does that tell us? It tells us that, oh, hey, you know, those something's going on there. Are we not engaging the kids there? Is it a population base, or do I need to start PD in a different way with my educators in the building? So
Bring that relevancy, awareness of the
absolutely. So we really want to do that, and when we look at assessing resiliency across those areas that I mentioned, that can help us to do that. So we want to be sure that we look at and choose tools that are evidence-based. So
Right.
And I have another question, because I didn't want to brush over these 6 areas.
Sure.
I didn't know if we're going to get into them more, but
we can.
academic confidence, what do you mean by that?
Academic confidence? Confidence, we actually break confidence down into multiple areas. And so our confidence are things like test taking. So am I confident there? It's and resiliency, and that's where you get into a lot of the discussions now with stuff like Angela Duckworth's information on grit and things like that, is you really want to have your definitions well defined. So our confidence pieces are ones that relate to academics for us. It's not just do I have the confidence that I can succeed no matter what you throw at me? It's how it relates, and how my confidence in survival, my confidence in academics, that I can be successful in school, that I can take tests. The other thing that's really interesting when you look at some of the taking tests business is that we've been so focused on end of course assessments and on standards that this type of data, when sorted, you can even, as I mentioned before, the financial piece, you could do the same thing. I could look and across the whole thing, if test taking confidence is the one factor that's low all across the school or across the district, that may tell me that we've got an emphasis not on true competency education, but on passing the test. You know, getting to graduation. And the kids are really, really stressed. You know, that's the message they've been given for how long, and it'll show up in the data.
And I think sometimes school personnel kind of think there's an issue, but this gives you the proof or a way to measure and say, this is something we really need to focus and work on.
Yeah.
So that's good.
It does.
Yeah, I think the whole thing, that this is data, as in it's like the whole thing about we know that's so. We just know it's so, you know, it's just intuitive or whatever. Of course they have afraid of tests, so they don't have the data to back you up. I think the really interesting thing was you're talking about a district wide, and there's this general pattern, and then there's one school that's an anomaly, and that's really powerful to say, oh, you know, we tend to be in this community this way. There's something going on, whatever that particular item is.
Right.
That's tremendous. That you can really then zero in and talk and, you know, deal with whatever's going on in that school.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then a good tool will also let you do that at the building level.
Oh my!
So now I can segment my student population so that I can see, oh, hey, when I look at health and well-being, for instance, I've got this 60% of my kids, and I can find out who those are who aren't sleeping.
Yeah.
because that's going to contribute to academic success, and
Yeah.
and we need to
That
be
goes to
able
your
to
schedules.
adjust that, to the scheduling,
Scheduling, yeah, it does.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So a good tool is going to allow us to do that,
Wow.
and that's going to. Those types of tools will have the longitudinal evidence. They will have the backing. With the new legislation, there's a lot of folks who are coming out of the woodwork, if you will,
Sure.
related to resiliency and SEL because of non-academic measures. And states are looking for those, and districts are looking for those. And so you really want to find one that has the evidence, not just the research, but has the evidence behind it and is based on that. The other key thing that's really critical is, can it be taught? Is it malleable? Is it a skill that we can teach and we can help students to learn and to grow? If it's not well defined, if it's still in its infancy, even as a term, it's going to be hard to have a proven curriculum to support it.
Yeah.
The other piece is, and this goes back to your plan for it as well, is can it be used across all of your population? Can it be universal so that you can use it with every single ninth graders? For instance, if your plan for that is to test your resiliency as a part of your transition, then you want to look at, can I use that tool with every single ninth grader as a part of that transition plan to build a ninth grade academy then that transitions successfully to keep those kids in high school. In opposition to a universal might be one that's clinical, that you have to go through certain training to deliver or something like that. So you really want to make sure it's going to apply to your whole population.
That's a key time to be doing something like this, is ninth grade.
It is. It definitely
Sixth grade,
is.
ninth grade, first
Yes.
grade,
Yeah,
all
And,
those.
and how many we lose in that ninth, 10th grade? You know, traditionally there's so many lost and overwhelmed. And how do you even know who those kids are going to be unless you have something like this?
Right.
You're just
That's right.
guessing.
Can do
Yeah.
8th or 9th. The
Yeah.
other thing too is, it's a great system, will let you assess them at say 8th or 9th grade. You gain your resiliency, work with them, and then look at their maybe in their 10th or 11th grade, then the resiliency skills necessary and the awareness skills for college and career readiness, so that it becomes a spectrum.
Yeah.
And that way you can show growth from whether you started at the elementary level and all the way through. You can really truly look at what your interventions are doing.
With these tools, are there some expected growth? I mean, is there a way to know whether that's, the growth we have, is that good, bad, or, should we be doing better? Or there's some kind of benchmarks?
Anytime that you implement an early warning system of any kind, you want to set some targets.
And it's going to be specific to the context too.
It is.
probably.
It's
Very-
definitely going to be specific, but you want to look at what your metrics are as you go through that. And we've got a slide at the end that'll give you an idea a little bit about like percentage growth. But you really want a very firm implementation plan that says, okay, we're going to assess, this is all of our assessment factors.
Yeah.
Then you review that data. We take a look at, everybody agrees then on what those interventions are.
Okay.
Now we implement the interventions. Then you want a tool that has a pre and post so that you can look at, did our interventions work? So did we really address the now what question that comes out of the data?
Yeah.
And then be able to readjust
Yeah.
and reassess then as you move forward.
Now, all these resources are on the website, because I'm hearing all this and thinking, oh, I need to look at that, I need to look at that, to see how this is so new to me for the assessment of resiliency. But it does address the need to find those many kids who slip through the cracks.
It does.
And there's so many. that just blindsides you that this child's having a problem, or this child's gone, or whatever is going wrong with them, because we had no idea their grades were fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or you get attendance is the only factor,
Yeah.
and they just haven't been coming.
Mm-hmm.
And so you try, and as a counselor, usually is where they end up, you try and have a conversation with them, and they don't know what to say.
Yeah.
A lot of times we haven't taught them.
Mm-hmm.
So assessing resiliency and using your definitions, like our valuing education, as a part of your curriculum to teach your children and to grow those skills also helps to facilitate that conversation.
Yeah.
So now if I have a student who starts not attending as a counselor, I've got conversation with them, because our goal, and we use these in all of our implementations, in all of our academies, tools like this, and it helps us to drive the conversation. So now I can say, so help me understand what's going on about attendance. And now, because we've trained the kids in the same language that we use, they can look at this and say, my physical stress is just really, really high. I haven't been sleeping. Or I haven't had any activity, and so I'm really stressed. Or one of our factors is agitation. You know, they may sit like this in class, and we think they're agitated, but their agitation score on the resiliency isn't there. They're moving like this in class because they're bored to death. So it really becomes a conversational tool then that you can use to help.
How
both.
helpful. I mean, you can say, what's wrong? I don't know. I mean, you can just see that. Well, we're going to try to find out.
Try to find out.
Let's have this. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's such a great thing.
And recently we had an implementation, and one of the administrators was looking at the data, and one student jumped out at him, and he said, I never would have thought. This is great, though. You can't hide from this, because this, and he went on to tell us exactly what was going on with that student's life.
You can't hide from
And
this.
he said, you can't hide from resiliency data. And we were blown away because that was an unsolicited response to using resiliency data, and it's great.
Wow.
So it
Just so
makes
much
a big difference.
true pictures.
Yes.
True pictures.
Absolutely.
We're going through the keys to assessing resiliency. We got a little bit off.
Well, but I think we hit
okay.
the majority of those, Karen. That's a good catch.
Good.
Because we talked about the majority, evidence-based, it's teachable, universal. You do want it to monitor district, school, and individual student levels. That's a critical piece.
Yes.
And then be easy to use. Then fit into tier-based structure. So we mentioned just a little bit ago response to intervention and the multi-tiered systems of support. And a good tool will let you easily see and sort that data so that you could have a resiliency-based 3-tier system. So now everyone universal is going to get a focus, a preliminary focus on those 6 resiliency skills at the universal language level. And then that secondary tier might be your kids who show higher risk in specific areas or have a risk profile. But most importantly is what we got to in that last kind of conversation is about the now what.
Yes.
So the data needs to drive us. If it just gives us, the student needs grit. Don't know how to teach that yet. So it doesn't answer the now what question. You really want a tool that's going to dive deep and answer that. And it's even better if you find a tool that has matching curriculum that goes with it. There are some out there. There's some references on the website.
Oh, good.
Some really good ones that will match. Just and the six areas may be different in the tool that you use, but that assessment matching the curriculum means you have consistency, common language throughout the whole implementation, which means you can increase your resiliency goals across the school.
Mm-hmm. There's so many of these now what's based on school climate. How much is school climate? When I think of that pyramid, I always think of the green tier, the base tier.
Right.
It is so much about, so it's foundational, but the school climate is in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about values or motivation, the school climate supports the idea that everybody graduates or that everybody is going to, find, career options, but it's all in that climate piece.
It is.
Yeah, and so it's really seeing where in our climate, which is so foundational for most students, really for all students, but it may be all that is needed for most students. We want to at least have that, but we're missing this one thing that would really make a difference. That's what it can pick out. Because you think, oh, I've got a great school climate, we do this, we do that, but do we? Maybe we aren't. Maybe we aren't as great as we think we are.
That's
and
right.
This is going to tell you, but you don't know where to look. The data will tell you.
Right.
That's exactly. And it can't be hidden.
Yeah.
I love that statement of that student. How wise.
Yes.
Young people are so wise. He really
they
saw
are.
It. He saw it.
They really are. They really are. And talking about the now what we had recently some elementary teachers together looking at the resiliency and their location, and they were able to see, just like you mentioned, that one of the things was they didn't feel as connected to their staff. Come to find out there was a large immigrant population coming in, and the educators, you got some language stuff and all of that, and they addressed that with now what's and lunches with the principals and some language specific and cultural development pieces. And when they post-tested, they saw gains. Their connection scores. Yeah. But they addressed the now what. The data's only as good as what you do with it.
And that also tells me you've got to do it not just once and we're done. We got a good school climate.
Right.
There's change going on in our schools, and what was good 5 years ago, we're a different school today, and so many people out there know this, that it's a different school environment today, different population, different demographics, different something.
Right.
Maybe. So let's see if we continue to honor, because this was fine in 2010, but it's 2016 now, and it's not fine anymore. Why?
Right.
What's changed? And let's find out.
Right.
Yeah, so that's very important. I think that this is a continuous process.
It is.
Yeah.
It very much is. And so, we've got a sample up of some of the resiliency data just so that you can see.
Yeah.
One of the key things for me is really, we mentioned earlier about being easy to read and easy to understand. Ideally, it's great when I can look at something and see, oh, it's red, it's yellow, I can pull those students out. This is just a screenshot of Excel. I can very quickly sort this if I wanted to. I will point out this example is what caused me to think when I was looking at this about the test taking.
Yeah.
Because when we look at that test taking column, there's only 2 children on this shot that are green.
Right.
Everything else is red and yellow. So how quickly it was that we can find that.
Yeah.
That's definitely an issue that pops out.
Yes. And it's immediately actionable. It's immediately up for discussion, and let's put a plan together.
For discussion, right.
That's right. So when we talk about changing climate, we're going to get to changing climate by using some of the data and putting a plan together to address that.
Wow.
The other thing that I really like about this particular example is that academic risk index. So some products will, in their longitudinal studies, will have taken certain questions and aligned those to whether students were really successful in graduating from high school. So this particular product does that. So that student who is bright purple there at 70 to 79%, they're at risk of dropping out based on not just the categories, but based on their comparison to 25% of of the kids of the sample
At that same
got
school
that same
location.
thing and
Yeah.
did not succeed in high
Oh.
school.
So you're getting that
So you're
community
getting
influence and
everything.
Oh,
in that,
Yep.
at least as recently as you can compared
Oh, yeah.
to a group that
Yeah.
you could
And
Absolutely.
site specific.
Wow.
Then.
Yes, you do
Yeah.
get site specific.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow.
A good tool also, because this is in Excel, we can look at how it connects to the ABC data.
Mm-hmm.
So the next example that's up here has those ABC factors. It's got their attendance, their behavior pieces, and their grades in different areas, color coded the same way. You can do that in Excel fairly easily. And then it's got the next 6 areas of the resiliency next to it. And so now I can really look and see the root cause
Yeah.
of
you can
the failure points.
correlate a
The
little
correlate.
bit too.
That's exactly right. Or I can look and see, for instance, I would never have found this kid with ABC data.
Mm-hmm.
They've been attending, or their grades are all
right.
good. Or I can look and see, their grades are plummeting. They're still here, but their grades are plummeting. Well, lo and behold,
Yeah.
they don't think that education is relevant.
Ah.
So they're bored to death, or it doesn't have anything that's applicable to them, or they could even be somebody who doesn't have the skills. So I'm sitting in the back of class,
Yeah.
and I need some remediation, some intervention, let alone making it relevant to me. And a lot of people, and this is just my own pet peeve, but a lot of people think of relevance in terms of real world connections.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only relevant if the child thinks it's relevant.
That's right.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you can have it the right setting for it, but unless the kid makes meaning of it, it doesn't matter.
Right.
So it's really important that we look at the full spectrum of the data and be able to move forward with that.
That's interesting to see how
Mm-hmm.
you can find a cause that doesn't even, the first thing that doesn't come into your head is actually the cause.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, but
That-
we never would have known unless you had this type of instrument to help point out that
Absolutely.
that lack or that need, or just not valuing. I mean, you could this whole thing about education. You can see the relevance to learning. Okay, let's take calculus, because then you can have all these opportunities. Well, I don't care about those opportunities. Calculus is not going to take me to where I want to go. From my perspective, forget it. I don't get it, and I don't see why.
Mm-hmm.
That I could understand. Did you ever take calculus?
Well, I think you have to figure out the relevancy,
Yeah.
and if you
And if
didn't,
If in my life I want,
that.
someone
because
told
it
me
probably
yesterday.
is, and you don't.
Someone told me yesterday about this is going to become a lawyer. He had to do everything to become a lawyer, but deep down, and he did everything he was told, but he really wanted to be an actor. So he went through
Oh,
the
wow.
family, spent all this money going to law school, and then when he came out, I just want to be an actor. So they may have this totally different view of life, artsy or whatever, as opposed to science and math, which is very important. But if it's not for you, it's not for you, and you kind of know. Sometimes people know.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you, I knew. But I mean, it's just saying that I understand putting myself in a teenager's mindset. That
Sure.
There's no way you can ever convince me that this is important. And so that's a discussion then back for counseling, and let's kind of find out what is important to you and what do you do, because you don't need calculus to graduate,
That's
but what
right.
do you need to pursue your dreams, and what are they?
Right.
Yeah. So it's an interesting
Or is there
thing.
something just not making that connection?
Yeah, or there is a
You know,
connection
there
to
is.
calculus,
And you
and
just
maybe I
haven't
want to be a
come up.
nurse, and
Or you
I-
like space, and
yeah.
and you
I
might have a connection and you don't realize.
I don't even know what calculus is. All I know is I avoided it like the plague. So it's all that,
It
it's
is.
all that, and it's okay, but it gives you the tool to kind of have like you said, to have the conversation.
That's
it
right.
goes back to that. We
Yeah.
don't even know where to start.
That's
now
right.
we do know where to start.
Right.
Because you don't value this course.
And a good
Yeah.
tool from resiliency will take you into college and career readiness, because what you're really talking
Yeah.
about there is, have I the skills and do I know where to go get that information so that I can make that decision?
Yeah.
Yeah. The tools that we use have, and we've got a spectrum here in just a second, but the elementary moves into middle and high, moves into college and career readiness. And in that college and career readiness, we extend those 6 resiliency areas that we talked about earlier, so that you get the self-awareness, the college awareness, as well as what is it going to take to be successful,
all
those
that
types of, and where do they go to get the knowledge? Do I have the confidence I can go find that information?
Those 6 measures can take you through life.
They can.
With learning, lifelong learning.
Absolutely. They
It's
certainly can.
important to have all those.
Yes.
Wow.
So one of the key things as we went through, and I've got the did our intervention work slide up here, because it's really important for us to just pause and say, okay, at some point in time I've got to measure. We did the data, we defined our now what, and set our plan in action. So at what point are we going to reassess and determine whether it worked or not? And a solid tool is going to give you, again, something that's very easy to identify what progress we're making, so that it's a percentage gain or it just doesn't show anything. The other piece with resiliency is to make sure that as we look at that data, we're taking into consideration students and impact, what's happening in the community. We've had some major tragedies that have happened in the nation recently, and those will impact resiliency data, because I can instantly feel stressed, and if I take that after a major tragedy in an area, it can help me really to define the needs that I need to be able to help my students with, but it won't then tell you your what now. So you want to be real careful when you're giving that as a post-test.
That's an interesting point about the timing
Right.
of it. It needs to be kind of a steady period of time where there's not something traumatic in the community or
You do.
or nationally.
Absolutely.
But often in the community there's something that's not the time to take the test.
No, it's not.
Or at least make a note about that.
That's
what you
correct.
call, I found out yesterday this term, a confounding variable.
Yes.
Something
Ooh.
outside of the
Yeah.
setting.
That's absolutely
could
right.
That's
impact the-
having an impact. Yeah.
Right. That's right.
Good advice.
Go
Good
ahead.
advice. Yeah.
So a good system would allow you to monitor, which you could also use if you were implementing a program that you need to do some reporting on.
Sure.
You could use that data. in there.
Absolutely.
And so is it important for if a school system has this enhanced early warning system in place? Is it important for them to try to aim toward having longitudinal, long-term data? I'm sure that also smooths out some of those confounding variables that
does.
come in.
It does.
The longer term you can monitor.
Right. When you're looking for a tool, you want to look for one that's going to allow you to set up those post-assessments or post-surveys at the time that's going to match what your implementation looks like. So, for instance, if you're a Gear Up grant, and you've got 3 or 5 years worth of funding, and you've got to do your yearly reports or your evaluations, then you want to set that up so that you're getting your results for those same students over time, whether you do that once a semester or whether you do that once a year. But you want to look for a tool that's going to allow you to collect that so that you're not shifting language and shifting data trying to compare apples to oranges at the end of your evaluation period. Yeah.
And then I was also thinking about professional development. Is that I know that's got to be an important element for monitoring and knowing what you're doing about it. How does professional development, I'm sure, is important.
It is, and professional development, number one, helps you establish a common language so that we're all using the resiliency, the right definition of resiliency together. We all have defined the components. We all understand what those are. But then how do I, as an educator, it takes it a step further than that in terms of how do I, as an educator, take all of this information and put it into action? How can I help build the resiliency skills every day of the students who come in contact with me? So it's I might not have been inclined to greet them every day at the door.
Okay.
If I greet children every day at the door instead of sitting at my desk or being at the board preparing things, what's the difference going to be between the way that they feel coming into my class and the way that they exit? Going to be huge. But now if I measure that see, you can take it as small or as large as you want to in the now what. That one change may impact that connection score for that group of kids, because now I feel connected to my teachers.
Simple
So
as
it
that.
can be as simple as that.
Simple as that.
Right.
I think, and we are a professional development program. We want to alert everybody that this really is an introduction to you all out there about a whole process that is probably new to you, and you realize that this is just a starting point. I just want to caution. This is just a starting point. There's,
Right.
And I want to ask something too,
Yeah.
because I know you're a dropout prevention specialist, program completer. Are you available? I know we'll put your email and phone number up. It seems
Sure.
like are you available to help people figure out
Sure.
what things they need to put in place, how they do it, how they align it with what they need to incorporate?
Absolutely. I would be delighted.
This is
to
why
help
we have
them.
dropout prevention specialists, and especially bringing our attention to something like this that is just not, oh, okay, we know all that is, we can go and do it. And, well, wait a minute, I'm hearing things that they need professional development, and it's not just this.
No.
Just want to make
That's
that clear.
right.
That's all I'm saying.
That's right. That's exactly right. And we're happy to address it at all levels. We know that resiliency, it's got to start early.
Yes.
Elementary school, even. We have to be careful, elementary school, because elementary school kids still sometimes want to please their teachers. So you want to make sure you have a tool where you start where I'm not having to read it to them, and they kind of say, "Oh, wonder what my
What does she
teachers,
want
what
me
does she
to-"
want me to say?"
Yeah.
Miss Stewart, what do you want? We want their input. So you want it old enough that they'll give a realistic picture for you.
But that's really good that you are starting early. I knew so often,
Yes.
and many of the early warning systems in the last several years have been high school,
Right.
without realizing that it just doesn't happen when you walk in the door of the high school. There's been things going on as a child develops.
And talk about being able to teach it. You can teach it earlier, can't you?
Yes, you
A
can.
lot easier.
Yeah.
A lot of
Imagine
times.
if you had a district that embraced whatever their 6 definitions are. And now we started that in elementary school, and we carried it all the way through to the end.
Yeah.
Test taking confidence. I mean, there's a lot of
Everything.
things you could teach
That's right.
much younger.
Exactly.
Oh, we hope there's some districts out there listening to this.
Yes, I do too. I
Yeah,
definitely do.
that'd be super.
It would
Yeah.
be super. It really would. Because I have a personal investment in it. I don't want to see kids go through the way I did.
Yeah.
I had a very successful thing. I hope Mother doesn't listen to this, but great parents.
You were in pain.
Yes, yeah.
But I was in pain
were
a
in
little
pain.
bit.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you were one part of the resilience relationships is you had great parents.
Right.
Let's think of how many
Think
kids
of
whose
who-
parents are in stress.
That's
And
right.
can't be great parents for them at that time
and
as
that
much
was
as
in
they
the
love them.
60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Imagine today's kids with everything that they have going on and coming at them
I
so
know.
fast. That's hard. It's real hard. So it really helps us, not just with the kids, but it also helps us as educators. So now, because we have the common language and we can look at not just the ABC data, but we can look at the predictions and the root causes, now I have ways that I can make things relevant for my children and for my parent conversations as well.
Right.
Yeah, so it becomes a conversation that all of us can have and all of us can understand. It also helps us, and a lot of times we focus on our dropouts as being those who are academically at risk or behaviorally, but we tend to think of those who are not performing. It can also help identify those kids who are so far and above the rest that they should be doing, like we talked about calculus, they should be doing calculus when everybody else is in Algebra 1 to help us, more challenged, right, or a different way. I mean, research has shown that a lot of our at-risk kids they don't necessarily learn or want to learn in the same way, but give them an artistic method in which to express something.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's going to come more natural to them, and this data can help us as educators to do that, and that in turn for the district will reduce our costs in the long run. Make sure that our interventions are right. We're not just funneling money out there, but then it also really helps us to change the culture, and that can help change the culture even of the community then, and the support. So questions?
Well, I just thought when you mentioned about, it can help all students because you can you can identify strengths this way too and build on those.
Yes, you can. Yeah. You absolutely can. And we see that in some locations. You'll see, particularly when you're looking at the progress data and the growth. So you may see across your district that you had these couple of buildings and you put your plan into place and oh wow, look. Now we see a huge amount of growth, and we can see it in all those areas across those students in that building. So it can be cause for celebration, really, that then in terms to facilitate even more positive culture building. So,
do you have any final thoughts for us?
I do have. I usually do. You know me well. You know me well. First and foremost is the new legislation, and we're still awaiting guidance, all of that as it comes out, but it focuses on and requires a non-academic measure for students. The state departments of education are going to have to put this into action.
Every Student
Succeeds Act. And we really want them to have a measure of resiliency, because it gets to the whole child. It's one thing to have an end-of-course assessment or flexibility to take the ACT versus the SAT as a state test, but that doesn't tell me about whether that student has the wherewithal and the other skills to be able to put that academic knowledge to the test.
So explain this to me, that this all other assessment that is being required, there's like a laundry list that's given, just pick one? Or is it, tell me.
The legislation just stipulates that it has to be a non-academic measure. So a state could say that they're going to use, for instance, the survey that we mentioned earlier that was the surveillance survey put out by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. There could be something that is a climate survey like that they choose to use as a non-academic measure. We hope, it's my hope personally, that they use a resiliency survey, that they don't do just a climate, because climate is based on somebody looking outward, and a student's facing survey is an inward, and it's what I have as far as growth, and it really helps us deal with that whole child.
And it seems like the resiliency surveys that we've been talking about include that component of school climate, so it's more.
It would be
That's
more,
right.
It would
more
be better,
detailed.
more detailed.
That's exactly.
Down to the individual.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the other things in terms of final food for thought is look for one with longitudinal evidence. Evidence is another key change in the Education Act, in that the No Child Left Behind was focused on research based, and everybody did a scramble at that point in time. And with this new one, the language has changed a little bit so that it's evidence-based. And so basically it's asking for proof statements.
Yeah.
So show us the longitudinal data that's behind what you're doing, and that's important. And then the last food for thought is really a challenge to the listeners to think about resiliency and early warning systems and ask yourself a key question. When I look at what I'm doing in my district as an early warning system or in my building, am I getting the results of an autopsy, or am I identifying what I need for an intervention?
And that's an excellent question and an excellent point to end on. This has been tremendous that there is such a thing to help so many students who fall through the cracks. We're going to find them. They can't hide.
They can't hide.
I love that.
Yes, I do
Thank
too.
you, Leanne.
You
for
are very
joining us.
welcome. Very welcome.
Yeah, it's been wonderful to have you here at Clemson. We're here
Thank
in the
you.
studio. We
Thank
always
you.
like having our guests here with us.
Well, it's been a joy to be
great.
here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to help in any way we can.
And I think you'll get some context about that because of your position as a diploma. What do you call it?
National Dropout Prevention Specialist Program Completer.
There you are.
I guess that's the
Yes,
full
okay, that's
official
good.
name.
That works.
And there'll be things up on the website about
Yes,
that soon. So,
yes,
boy, what a
easy to
great
find them.
resource. What a great resource. Thank you.
You're
Thank
very
you.
welcome.
Well, Karen, here we go. We've learned a lot again today. We ought to earn a specialist
Oh, I think
certificate
so.
because we learn so much here on Solutions
Let's
every
see if we
month.
can get credit for this.
Yeah, I think we're going to put that down and I'm going to apply. That would be great. But, well, to our viewers out there, we want to invite you to come back next month. School is starting. I know you're going to be really busy, but, you know, when you want to take a breather in September, second Tuesday, find us at 3:30 right here in the same place, and we'll be very happy to share some new information to help you solve the dropout crisis. Thanks for joining us.